Cybersecurity is a constant threat, but not always a boardroom issue. Now, world events have set us all on high alert. So, what should boards and senior management be considering to protect themselves? I'm here with Accenture's Giovanni Cozzolino and Saba Ahmed to find out. Welcome back to Tomorrow, Today. Gio, Saba, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Ollie.
Gio, let's start with you. Cybersecurity here in the UK, any sense as to whether we're more vulnerable, more prone to being attacked than other countries, but also give us a flavour of how seriously we take this as a nation?
As a country, I think we are as susceptible as any other country out there. And probably looking at some of the geopolitical events that we see in the world at the moment, you would probably argue that the UK may be even just a little bit more of a target out there. You know, the UK has been relatively on the forefront of bringing in regulation about guiding businesses. And, you know, we're only going to see further regulation in the UK to actually guide those businesses in a little bit more in preparation for cybersecurity.
Yeah, so I get that sense, Saba, of a rising threat. Any extent to which an organisation can dial up and down their security?
Absolutely. For organizations, they always need to stay a step ahead of attackers, and that itself is a constant challenge.
Yeah.
For them, it is about dialing up security, and to do that, they need to combine two factors. One is to understand the threat landscape.
Yeah.
The second part to it is to understand your assets and their value.
What about the human element? How do we all play a role in this? How do you see it playing out?
So humans are the weakest link. You know, in any organization, your staff, your employees potentially could be the weakest link if they don't have the right training in terms of security. But there's another aspect as well in terms of cybersecurity skills, which is a shortage. It is high in demand and short in supply. So for organizations to bring in innovative ways to retain talent and to upskill talent is a critical one.
So Gio, that reminds me of the sort of conversations that an organisation might have around sort of health and safety. I mean, is that pushing it too far?
No, I think the organisations that we see leading the pack are actually moving away from just the standard education that they would do once or twice a year, or the passive education, to those organisations that are really pushing cybersecurity to be part of their culture.
Yeah.
So, as you pointed out, health and safety, why not including security as part of that?
Yes, that's a fascinating shift. I mean, but this is such a huge topic, but I do want to get a glimpse of the types of attack that you've seen on the rise. Anything that's more prevalent today than it would have been a few years ago? Just give us a quick snapshot.
Well, the trends that we are seeing in terms of attacks are, the top three, I would say, are cloud attacks, cloud infrastructure attacks, ransomware attacks, and supply chain attacks.
Gio, on supply chain, this goes back to the threat analysis, because it's not just your own organisation that you need to be thinking about. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, supply chain attacks are extremely complex, because even when an organisation has full trust in their supplier, in the way that they operate and their own sort of security controls. What's not to say that that suppliers, doesn't have the same kind of standards. And as Saba said, we've seen a massive increase in supply chain attacks. We saw the Colonial Pipeline last year, which was a major attack. We've also seen quite an increase in vulnerabilities that have been notified. So, for example, Log4j and SolarWinds, where organizations are just scrambling to understand where these sources of codes are so that they can actually remediate those vulnerabilities.
Right, and Log4j, this is a particular piece of code which became very vulnerable, caused a huge outbreak of attacks.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so Saba, give us a practical tip on this supply chain point. How do we shore those up? Because as Gio's telling us, the network effects mean that this is incredibly complex.
There are a couple of things that organizations can do. One is audit. So integrate audit into your DevOps. Ensure that security is embedded not just into DevOps, but also into your application onboarding with things like automated code scanning.
And what's another way of saying DevOps in that context?
Your operations team that develops applications. Yeah. The other thing that organizations can do is to threat model suppliers, threat model third-party organizations that they work with, threat model value chains and supply chains, which means that understand who has access to what, at what level they have that access, understand the security practices of the organizations that you're working with. These things together, as well as being prepared in case a cyber, attack or a supply chain attack does impact you, then how are you going to deal with it? How well prepared are you?
And on threat modeling, presumably, Gio, not all suppliers are equal. I mean, otherwise this whole process could be completely time constricting for the organization.
No, I mean, I think, there's a big difference between a bank and what they need to protect, say, for example, to, a small, manufacturing. But the risks, although are very relevant for both organizations in the sense that, a very small, organization that does manufacturing of a product, they can be attacked and that organization could cease to exist.
Right. Saba, let me put to you another challenge which I know plays on the mind of many viewers. Cloud transformation and cyber threats associated. Where do we start?
We know that most of organizations started their cloud migration journeys very early on, but with the pandemic, they accelerated cloud adoption. With that acceleration came the challenges around security and compliance requirements and meeting those at a faster pace. There are two parts to this again. With cloud transformation and the cloud journeys, security not always has been at the onset of that transformation. It's always been an afterthought. The other thing is that for organizations, cloud skill set and cloud security skill set is gold dust. Finding and retaining that talent is a challenge. The other side to this is that for the same reasons why organizations are adopting cloud, attackers are also leveraging cloud to scale and make their command and control infrastructure more reliable.
Which means the impact of their attack
is much stronger and faster and quicker as well.
So why don't we finish, Gio, with some practical thoughts for someone watching today that is conscious not only of protection but also responding in the wake of an attack?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would advise any client to, first of all, get their cybersecurity basics in place. And then there's the other area, which is around having that level of preparation. And so that's all about getting their resiliency plans in place, their incident response plans in place.
And mapping out sort of how that could look in the eventuality that it did actually get triggered. What about a final practical thought?
This was more like a recommendation for CISOs to engage and collaborate with the wider executives within the firm rather than working in the traditional, very security-focused, siloed way of working. For them to collaborate with the wider leadership would help to define that security strategy, which is much more aligned with business priorities and risks, which benefits the organization overall.
Right, and involves demystification.
Absolutely.
And back to the communication point. Thank you for doing just that today, Saba, Gio. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you.